Welcome, Kim.
Thank you, V. I'm so glad to be here with you today and covering this really important topic for your audience.
Yeah, super important. And Kim has a really large following online. She's got a really large YouTube community and client base, and rightly so, because the information she shares is really important. And she is someone who has first-hand experience and professional experience, so she walks her talk and she knows what she's about. So we're going to be talking, as we've said, about how to recognize narcissistic abuse in your relationships. This is a learning experience for me to be having you here, Kim, because it's not an area I specialize in, and I know people in our community need this information, and that's why I wanted you here.
Thank you.
And one of the questions Kim and I were just talking about before we started, which is where we can start, is does this apply to only intimate relationships, or is it possible to have narcissistic abuse in relationships of other types?
It is absolutely possible. Most people, when they think about being the target of narcissistic abuse, it usually assumes that you are talking about a romantic relationship, but it can be with anyone. It can be with a parent, a sibling, any family member, friend, coworker, even a boss, and church leaders, yoga teachers. It can be anyone.
Oh, wow. Okay, interesting. So that will really open people's minds up as we listen to Kim in this session. Think about how what she's sharing might be showing up in your life and different types of relationships that you might be struggling with. So we're going to talk about how to recognize the signs of narcissistic abuse, 8 specific indicators, which I thought was fascinating for someone who doesn't have any expertise or knowledge in this area. It was super, for me,
consider yourself lucky.
Yeah, well, I do feel very lucky, and at the same time, I'm coaching a lot of people, and I need to be able to recognize it in people that might be coming to me so that I can refer them to the right types of support networks and coaches such as yourself.
Right.
I also want to encourage everybody, before we dive into the 8 signs, to stay till the very end, because Kim has an amazing free resource, a healing journey toolkit, completely free for people. So we're going to share about that towards the end, about how you can get access to that. So Kim, do you want to just kick off with sharing how people can determine if they are the target of this type of narcissistic abuse?
Absolutely. So a lot of people don't really realize that they are being the target of narcissistic abuse. And I'll just kind of talk a little bit more about how it might look in a romantic relationship, for example. And that might be maybe in the beginning things were really wonderful, romantic, maybe there were lots of vacations and gifts and things like that. But then all of a sudden, the partner stops being as loving. They may start to complain about you, your habits, your appearance, any number of things. And you can't really figure out or put your finger on why things have suddenly changed. Now, there is, the honeymoon period in all relationships, even with friendships. But this is especially distinctive in the romantic relationship, and it's called the honeymoon period, or the love bombing phase, where the person is just giving you over the top romantic gestures, and then suddenly they just stop. Wow. And despite valiant efforts on your part, you might find that nothing is ever good enough to make them happy again. And so a lot of times what might happen is people may begin Googling things like, why does my partner ignore me? Or why does my partner lie to me? Or why does my partner make me feel anxious? And those are usually some of the most common things that people will start to research. And then somewhere along the way, they might come across the term narcissist or narcissistic abuse. But even then, I have people reach out to me for coaching, and they had no idea, even though they'd been in the relationship for years and years, that this is what they were dealing with.
And do people sometimes internalize that and think, well, there must be something that I'm doing, or spend months or years thinking that they need to change themselves?
Yes. And that is by design what happens in these relationships, because the whole agenda for narcissistic people is to avoid any kind of accountability and to make you take the blame for everything that's going wrong. And even for their own relationship crimes, if they're cheating or lying or stealing your money or any number of things, they'll make it feel like it's your fault. And over time, you may even begin to believe that.
Which is where the challenge comes in, and the erosion of self, the erosion of your self-esteem. And as you and I both know, your experiences, if you experience something of an intense emotional nature, particularly something negative and traumatic over and over and over and over again, and negative messaging over and over again, you can start to believe the most absurd things about yourself if you don't,
It's sad.
you're so in it that you can't see
Right.
what's happening. Okay. So shall we go through some of the indicators, the signs of narcissistic abuse? And you said you were going to share about 8 different things with us. And before we do, as someone who doesn't know, and so it's helpful for people who are listening that don't know, and they're trying to work out if they're in a relationship that's narcissistic, if it's not working for them. Is it possible that there would be people that are in not narcissistic relationships that have maybe one of these things going on, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's narcissistic abuse? Or is it or is it a combination of these factors that make it a narcissistic abusive relationship?
I like to refer to the dynamics of a relationship as your relationship climate. And so, just like any region on planet Earth, if things are really beautiful and sunny most of the time, then that's a very nice climate to live in. But if there's a pattern of tsunamis and earthquakes and that sort of thing in your relationship, then that's probably a very good indicator. So what it is patterns.
Well done. Okay, great.
So it's something that happens continuously over the course of the relationship. And you won't see these things in the beginning with a narcissistic individual. So if you find that you're always arguing, having circular conversations, and they're always, giving you what we call the silent treatment, where they stonewall you or they disappear and they go dark and you have no idea where they are, what they're doing, or what's happening. These are the kinds of things that over time, if it's a pattern, then that's very likely that you are being the target of narcissistic abuse.
Okay, great. So we're looking at patterns and something that happens continuously over time. Okay, great.
Yes.
So you want to take us through some of these indicators, these signs, and hopefully it's going to be really helpful for people that might have been confused about a relationship that they're in and wondering if there's something wrong with them, and hopefully it'll help to bring them to a place of greater clarity.
Absolutely. So one of the first signs is you constantly obsess about the other person. In this case, it might be a partner, and you feel utterly insecure about yourself. So you may not do this in the beginning of the relationship. This assumes that you've been in the relationship for a while, and these patterns are starting to emerge. And so you feel, because the person may either outright tell you things about yourself, or you're not fun anymore, you're not taking care of yourself like you used to, and they may, bring up stories of people flirting with them and that sort of thing. You just really start to feel insecure, and you're constantly obsessed about the person, why things have made that kind of turn, why they don't see you as attractive anymore, and you're just constantly obsessing about it and trying very hard to get back to that state of grace with them, but nothing you do ever seems to work.
And heartbreaking to go through that, right?
Absolutely heartbreaking. And in my field, this is what we would call the devalue phase. So there's the love bombing phase, which is the first phase of a narcissistic relationship, where you're the best thing, you're the king or queen of their life. They've never met anyone like you before. But then all of a sudden, it's like you're dirt under their shoes, and nothing you do can make them see you in the same light again. Mm-hmm. But it's important to remember that this is the design of narcissistic abuse. It's designed to make you feel that way about yourself, because if they're able to make you feel like everything's your fault and that you're not attractive anymore, or you're the reason they've started cheating, for example, you're going to feel really bad about yourself. And then by this time, you've undergone a certain level of conditioning. And it's very similar to Stockholm syndrome, except it's in a relationship with someone that you know. And so you start to form this bond with them. We call it a trauma bond. So even though you're starting to sense that things are really kind of bad, you can't bring yourself to leave the relationship.
This is so fascinating. And can I ask you, side note, because I'm just asking questions as we go, with the people that are behaving this way, narcissists, I'm sure that there are people that know they're doing it, and they are doing it, and they have had a pattern and they've run it, and for some reason it's given them what they need to inflate themselves or to whatever
Right.
they're looking for, power, control over whatever. Would it be fair that some people potentially do this, they start out somehow doing this, running patterns they've learned from their upbringing or parental or something, and they don't necessarily realize that they're doing it, but then they realize it gives them something, it gives them power, it gives them control, whatever. It's just where the person's coming from is so confusing.
Yeah, I mean, that is a common question that comes up all the time. Are they aware that they're doing it? And one of the biggest indicators that they are aware that they're doing it is that they abuse you behind closed doors. So when the two of you are alone together, they're really horrible to you and awful, and they're doing these terrible things and lying and cheating, and they're, leaving for weeks on end. But then when you're around other people, or maybe you've gone to an event, a work event or something like that, they are on their best behavior.
Okay.
So if they weren't aware that they were doing it, then their behavior would be kind of consistent in different kinds of environments. But the fact that they're different to other people, or maybe they're really, really sweet and nice to everyone else, that they treat you like dirt.
That's a very good, it's very helpful point, actually. I think that'll be useful for people. Okay, very good. And so should we move on to some of the other points?
Yes, another sign would be that the person is encouraging you in one way or another to detach from your family or friends, or maybe, close coworkers or people who could be there as a possible support system. Because once they start, treating you badly, and this is really part of their conditioning, they're literally programming you to think a certain way. And if you have other people in your life who are going to be telling you, I'm sorry, Kim, but this is totally off the rails here, they don't want people having that kind of influence over you. So they'll encourage you to detach from friends and family. And it could be seemingly innocent things like, oh, well, I don't think your friend Betty really likes me that much. Or, oh, by the way, your friend Betty was hitting on me when you went to the bathroom. And they'll make up stories and do anything to try to get you to detach from those people. Because then when things get really, really bad, you're going to be all alone. And that is what typically happens.
No support network, no one with objective insight into you and what's good for you, people that you would trust and love to guide you.
Right.
Without that, you're left with only your own thoughts and feelings, which if they're confused, leaves you with no compass, right? Okay, that's
exactly.
So interesting. Okay, yes, ready for the next point.
Okay, so you are the target of persistent verbal abuse. And this can be anything. It could be something, again, blatant, like, I think you need to start losing weight, to, are you sure those red shoes are what you're going to go with for our night out? It can be little things over time that really dig into your self-esteem and chip away at your confidence. And it could be, oh, you're so stupid. I can't believe I'm dating you. I thought that there was something wrong with you. Or they might say things like, even your friends told me not to trust you. So they're saying these things to really make you feel awful about yourself. And I know in regular relationships, we might say something a little bit insensitive here and there, but we have some awareness that, okay, maybe I hurt this person's feelings, and we'll try not to say that again, or try to be more sensitive to how we express ourselves. But with narcissistic people, they are fine with calling you names, cursing at you, degrading you. So there's a pattern of this kind of verbal abuse.
Because the difference between a healthy relationship is everybody can erupt like a volcano now and then and say things out of upset or anger in the heat of a moment at a partner or family member or friend, whoever it is. But it's the pattern. And I think what was kind of shocking to me is that the first two examples you gave of like weight and clothing, people could, on the receiving end of that, could potentially start to say, well, you know, you could kind of rationalize to yourself why someone might say that. And you could kind of go, well, maybe there is something, maybe I do need to look differently, or maybe they're right and that doesn't go. And maybe they're saying that because they want me to look my best and feel my, and so you could end up twisting it. I can see how people would get very sucked into accepting that kind of behavior. And I would imagine there's a lot of very smart, very intelligent, very intuitive, and very clever people that get sucked into the vortex of this behavior.
You would be surprised. I mean, a lot of my clients are people who are business owners, doctors, lawyers, artists of different kinds. I've had a few people who were, friends with celebrities. So it can be anyone. And to have a therapist call me and a counselor call me for coaching, it just means that this doesn't have anything to do with intelligence. Mm-hmm. It's targeting your subconscious wounding. Mm-hmm. And that is exactly how they keep you hooked. So yeah, the weight thing, for example, someone who really cares might say something to you about your weight, but they're going to do it and say it in a very caring and loving way, at least as much as they can. Mm-hmm. But if someone's telling you you've gotten fat, I'm thinking I may, start looking for another lover because I just can't stand to look at you anymore. I mean, that's the kind of thing, and it's happening over and over again like that. Mm-hmm. So there's a pattern of this kind of verbal abuse.
And it's just like so taking everything within me not to roar like a lion about this, because I am like so on the soapbox about people's self-esteem and self-worth and their sovereignty of their own spirit and soul. Like I want to cry about this. It's just like I'm not even affected by it, and it's so not okay. And
it's not
at any time, at any degree, it's not acceptable. And I'm so grateful that you're here sharing with us, so that if anyone is going through this, that there is an opening for them to see and to find a path forward. Okay, so hit us with the next indicator.
So this one is going to be a little shocking, but I hear about this a lot. They have threatened to either harm or kill your pet. And sometimes they will actually do it. Now, if this happens, there's a whole other level of psychopathy happening here. And so someone like that, you have to be really careful with. If that person has actually harmed or killed your pet, you need to get in touch with your domestic violence center in your area and figure out a safe exit plan, because this person is capable of a lot more. But it does happen. I've heard of people going away on vacation to visit a family member, and this person has their pet put to sleep, or they'll just let them out into the road to get run over. Just horrible, horrible things. And to you and I, this is very shocking. But I had my ex, husband, who many years ago, when I was still married to him, left my children and I went out, I don't know, some kind of little day trip to have fun together. And we came back home and he had left our hamsters out in the blaring sun and they had both died. So,
wow.
So it's things like that. It's just really cruel and crushing to your spirit and your soul, because people like us love little furry creatures and animals and giving them love, and to just imagine them being so helpless. And, but yeah, this is a very, very blaring sign that person is not safe for you.
It's an immediate indicator to seek help and a safe exit plan. And so what we're seeing is there's indicators of varying degrees and varying levels of I would say violence, because that's violence, but also I consider behavior inside your own mind, if it's very negative towards others, mental violence, emotional violence, psychological violence.
Yes.
And so I think it's a really good one to have raised, because it is quite shocking, and that's a very, people won't like hearing that, but that is a reality. You're helping people and you're hearing that and you've experienced it, and it's important for people to understand it's one of the indicators. Okay.
Yeah, because these people have a way of sort of smoothing out the shocking element. Like, they know it's shocking and traumatizing, but then they'll try to play it down like it's not that big of a deal. Well, they weren't happy here anyway, so I had them put to sleep.
And I think
and then over time,
listening to you talking about it is that, for me, when I'm thinking about the people I'm helping and often dealing with the difficulties of other people, not in this extreme type of situation, but whenever I hear of somebody's poor choices and poor behavior harming others, my question to myself inside is always, how did this person come to this level of darkness and pain inside of themselves that this is what spills out into the world?
Right. And narcissism, well, let's just talk about narcissism for a minute. There is narcissistic personality disorder. Most narcissistic people who actually have narcissistic personality disorder will never be diagnosed. For one, because a lot of them fail to seek treatment, and the ones who do are often very successful in fooling their therapist and making the victim themselves look like the crazy one. So you have a lot of people with these personality disorders, which narcissistic personality disorder is a cluster B disorder. And what that means is it's probably clustered with another disorder. So that's why some people have a hard time pinning down exactly what's going on with that person, because they could be a narcissist with antisocial traits. So there's comorbidity there. And narcissism is most related to psychopathy. So there are some very malignant behaviors that happen.
Thank you for sharing that. That's something that I never knew either. And I think that's just that is super valuable for people to understand, that it's not necessarily a standalone issue. It could be clustered with other things. It's really, really useful to understand. Okay.
And what I was trying to get to, and you just brought up a little while ago, but a lot of these do happen because of childhood wounding. Usually what happens, let's say a child grows up in a household where one parent is a narcissist or, antisocial or whatever. Narcissism is a defense mechanism, just like codependency is. And pretty much their empathy dies off if they ever even had it, which they probably did as a young child. Most of us are born with that. They kill it off. And it's not something they can regain once that happens. They can't be taught empathy. They can't develop it again. All they can do is pretend.
How interesting. And so just a couple of things that I'm thinking about for people listening is that when we hear about what someone goes through to understand, I always say to people, take a moment to understand what might lead somebody to the behavior that they're engaging in. But that does not justify it, warrant it, absolve them of responsibility, or mean you should stay in the firing line of it.
Absolutely.
Understand where this comes from, because it gives you a greater sense of clarity. When we have clarity, when we have understanding, we can move forward. But the other thing is that, and I would love to know from you if this is what happens sometimes in this particular type of relationship dynamic, be it family, friends, or intimate relationship with a narcissist. But sometimes you see when you're in interactions with someone else and they have a problem, some types of people that are very empathetic and healing and caring want to help the person and fix the person. The problem being in any type of relationship, if the problem is being put on you, you probably are not the person that is equipped to help the person heal, nor can you make someone heal when they are not interested.
Right. I'm glad you brought that up, because in my field, there's this running sort of dialogue that empaths are perfect targets for narcissists. Empaths, meaning we feel other people's feelings, we have huge compassion for other people and for animals and for planet Earth, and we want to heal. That's what we're here for. But there's also the situation where a lot of empaths are trying to heal people in a completely out of control fashion, and that's why they often become drained. And it's soul crushing. It's really soul crushing to be in that kind of relationship where these, you're getting hit with trauma after trauma. You haven't even gotten over the last thing that happened before another one. You're being hit with something else, and so it's really, there is a spiritual reason behind these relationships, but a lot of people get stuck because they won't leave. They really think they can heal that person. And it's not the loving thing to do. The most loving thing we can do actually is leave them, so that if there are going to be any consequences, that's the only way they're going to realize that what they're doing is wrong. But sadly, narcissists don't learn that lesson, because there's always a wounded person who comes along and gets sucked into their vortex, so to speak. But there is a very good spiritual evolution that happens to people who are able to leave and do the inner work. But yeah, it's not our job to rehabilitate adults unless they're truly having some kind of, maybe physical disability, or maybe they had an accident and they've got a brain injury. That's something they can't help. But abuse is a choice.
Yeah.
And if that's the choice they're making, there's nothing we can do to make them change.
I think that's one of the most important lessons in relationships, full stop, and very important in this type of, what you're talking about, this type of abusive dynamic. And the challenge is when you love someone so much, or you love what you think the person might be, or you have a vision of who you think the person is, but it's not really who they are. And you're so holding on to that you think in a relationship you help each other grow.
Right.
True. In a healthy relationship.
In a healthy relationship, right.
But like you said, sometimes the most loving thing to do, and in a case of abuse, the only loving thing to do, primarily first for yourself, which is always good for everybody. If it's highest good for you, it's highest good for everyone, is to leave.
Especially if children are in the household.
Actually.
Which kind of leads me to the next topic is, if you have children and either they are, you share custody with a narcissist, or maybe you have children from a previous relationship and they start underperforming in school. Because children who live in an abusive household can and do develop brain abnormalities that can come across as aggression, depression, ADD symptoms, but it also, using brain scans, they've shown that this chronic stress actually does hurt the brain. It can cause structural changes in the brain. Let's see here. I want to make sure I get this right. So let me just refer to my notes. It shrinks the hippocampus and prevents new neurons from forming. So if there are children, especially young children, in a relationship, in a household like that, it's another reason to leave, because can also lead to PTSD for them. Just the act, and this has been proven in case studies, of children seeing one parent being verbally or physically abused can give them PTSD. So,
absolutely.
But yeah, if your child is underperforming, don't punish them. If you're living in a toxic household, you can't and you shouldn't punish them if their grades start dropping because they can't help it a lot of times.
Right. And it's, so we're looking at root cause, not symptoms. So dealing with study harder, you know, whatever it is that you think is going to get better grades, that's band-aiding symptoms. It's not what is leading to that in the first place. Would you see
Right.
that is particularly true for when you see the development of a narcissistic abusive situation and the child's been fine, and then all of a sudden something's so all of a sudden those symptoms start showing up, something is different?
Yeah, it kind of depends on the individual, how they're going to react to it. And it's not just kids who can form these abnormalities. It does cause cognitive decline in adults as well. I mean, I have worked with college professors who can no longer read a simple paragraph because of the amount of damage that's been done to their brain from chronic stress and emotional abuse over many years.
Can I just ask?
Luckily, the brain can heal.
Yes, I was just about to ask you. So I have some of my own techniques for that, but can I ask you, for in your experience specifically with the trauma from narcissistic abuse, from these types of prolonged stresses, what is your go-to recommendations for people in those situations?
Well, again, that kind of depends on the individual too, but I know tapping is a very good one.
Yes.
Yes. Tapping is a good one. Some people respond well to EMDR, which is eye movement desensitization reprocessing, but you have to make sure that you work with someone who's very skilled, because if you get the wrong person and they got their license at some weekend retreat, they're not going to know how to bring you back down. EMDR can be re-traumatizing to a lot of people. So if you go a few times and it's really not helping and it's making things worse, you might want to look to a different modality. I mean, there's so many different things. I had really good response from tapping and guided meditations. And your meditations were in there, Bernadette, in the beginning of my own healing journey.
Okay, beautiful, beautiful.
When you were pinch me living. So.
Yes. Okay. So yes, I think I have heard of people actually having great results with, EMDR, right? That's
Yes.
yes. And I've also had people say that they found it, what you said, which was re-traumatizing. So it's really about finding a practitioner that ideally is experienced in dealing with people who've been through trauma and abuse.
Right. Find a trauma specialist. Absolutely. But, you know, I personally found, you know, and that's why I say it depends on the individual. I did a lot of exploration, and like I said, tapping was good for me, guided meditations. I've also worked with shamans and spiritual healers when other traditional modalities didn't help.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so tapping, for anyone who doesn't know, EFT, emotional freedom techniques, also known as tapping, and I've got resources on that for people that are interested. And the other modality that I've done a few energy healing techniques, but one modality that I've also noticed is quite good is Psych K. So I trained in that after using tapping for various things, and it just synchronistically came to me. It was very much guided by the university.
Hey.
Trained in Psych K, and that has a beautiful healing process for balancing the hemispheres of your brain and releasing stress and trauma through the Psych K process. So that's another one. But I agree with you, EFT tap. The reason I love tapping is because it's a true self-help. So you can do it, you learn it, you do it at home, you do it anytime, anywhere. You don't need any.
Right.
That said, same as what we just talked about with getting a really good specialist. If you are going to tap on trauma and you don't know tapping and you've never addressed your trauma, go and do it with a certified practitioner who will guide you step by step, because it's a little bit like what you're talking about. You can open a can of worms using tapping on trauma.
Yes.
And you can't get out, you don't know how to navigate yourself through it. And it's not that tapping doesn't work, it's profoundly effective and life-changing. But if you get stuck in the middle of tapping on a trauma and you're overwhelmed and you don't complete the process,
Absolutely.
same type of results. Okay.
Absolutely.
So, Kim, there are a few more of these indicators you were going to share with us, which I'd love to hear more about for people to understand.
Well, number 6 kind of ties into an earlier one that we talked about, is that the person is constantly pointing out things they don't like about you. And this kind of ties into verbal abuse, but this one's a little trickier to figure out because it could be seemingly normal things. But again, we have to remember it's patterns. So if every day, the way I like to explain it is everything they said they loved about you in the very beginning of your relationship is now the bane of their existence. So your love for a certain type of art or certain type of music or the way you dressed or the books you read, were all just magnificent when they first met you, but now they mock you for those things.
Oh, so it's like a direct flip, which must be so confusing.
Right, because when you're being love bombed, this is the really sad thing, is that a lot of people feel self-actualized because they feel like they have finally found someone in the beginning who understands them, who loves everything about them, they're soulmates, but then all of a sudden, everything they once loved about you, now they dislike about you or even hate about you. So during that love bombing phase, you were feeling self-actualized, you were feeling real on top of cloud 9, and now those very same things are being used to mock you and make you feel badly about yourself. I mean, we spend our whole lives developing our personalities and our sense of wholeness and things that we love, and then for someone to turn around and make you feel ashamed about those things, that's another sign that you're dealing with a narcissistic abuser.
Yeah.
And when I say abuse, I'm typically meaning emotional abuse, but sometimes they do get physical. And in that case, again, contact your local domestic violence center.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yes. And I think the erosion of self, of the self-esteem, self-confidence, questioning yourself, that breakdown, I mean, that is the foundation of your beingness in the world. That is like we talk about the wholeness and completeness of you is what gives you the mechanism to function in the world. And when that is weakened, it's like chaos in your reality. So I can see how, and I imagine from your experience, you've seen how someone being in this type of relationship, how it must then start to affect them in their work, in their finances, in their health, in their all different areas. I just have to say one thing before we move on to the next point. I'm no expert in narcissistic abuse. You're the person. But I just have to say this one little thing. For anyone who's listening, who has ever had their self-esteem, self-confidence, self-worth eroded for whatever reason, if it's in this kind of situation or any other kind of situation, is you don't have to try to return to your wholeness. You are whole. You were born whole. Nothing anybody else ever says or does can ever dent the wholeness of who you are, but you can absolutely stray from that truth. And you can absolutely believe that that is not the case. So there's really coming home to yourself. And that's why I read your bio before we started this session for everyone. And I pointed out that really important point you said about that these types of experiences can be the catalyst for profound transformation. It's like dying in the fire and the ashes and rising in a newly formed
Absolutely.
day. And it's not cliche, and it's not a nice silver lining to put on a cloud. It is a powerful, powerful spiritual truth. And that's not to say in any way that anyone should be in those situations. It's not what it's about, but it's about saying if you are in those situations, there is so much ahead for you.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you said that. And I like to try to get people to think back to a time in their life before they met an abusive person. I mean, we all struggle with self-esteem and confidence. I mean, as a teenager, I was so shy and backwards, painfully so. I could barely, when I got my car, I could barely drive down the street and decide whether to go left or right. That's how backwards I was. So we all, because of, over culture, we all struggle with that. But when you get with someone, but we're usually able to overcome it. Okay, let's look at my accomplishments here, or maybe not even accomplishments. Maybe you're really kind, you're compassionate, and but then all of a sudden you're in this relationship and you feel like nothing you do is good. Nothing you do is good enough. You're just a bad person because you're being told that all the time. People really do lose that sense of wholeness. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Mm-hmm.
But you can get it back, thank goodness.
You can. Oh, yes, it is there. It is for the claiming. It is ready. And I think the most important point is, and I share this with people, that I get emails from people, randomly at the very bottom of their capacity to cope with life in very dark places. And the truth is always this: your heart is beating for a reason. You are breathing for a reason. You are here for a reason. Life supports you to be here. And it is not cliche to say that the best days are ahead and that your soul is here to rise, rise. And you will end up with the right people at the right time in the right places with the right information when you need it. It's about claiming the courage within. Don't hesitate. Don't hesitate. When something resonates and you're like, that's me, I need that, go with your intuition, right? Go with the intuition. Because I imagine there's a lot of people that are sitting in the situation and listening to you going, that's me.
Yes.
That's you. This is Kim. You know where to find her.
Well, I think where people get stuck sometimes is, first of all, they can't find a way to make themselves leave these relationships. And there are reasons behind that. A lot of it has to do with, let's just say it, brainwashing. It's exactly what happens. Your brain, your mind is reprogrammed to believe certain things and believe in certain ways. But there's also a biochemical addiction that happens. And this is why I really advocate for what I call the no contact approach, which is you completely block this person from being able to get through even the tiniest crack, because it's no different than someone who's trying to get over drugs or alcohol, and they're just taking a little tiny drink, or they're taking that one little tiny pill or whatever, thinking everything's going to be okay. And then before you know it, they're smack dab in the middle of the addiction. This does cause a biochemical addiction, and that's part of what makes it so hard, because as an addict, when you take away the drug, in this case it's the narcissist, because there are really low lows, and when we are feeling emotional pain, our brain releases different biochemicals to make us feel better. It registers as physical pain, and over time we become addicted to the highs and the lows of these relationships. But where people get stuck, even if they do get out, is they don't do any inner work. They think watching binging on YouTube videos, or reading a book or two, or getting in a Facebook group, or maybe doing nothing is what's gonna, time heals all things, but it doesn't. You have to dig deep, figure out where the wounds are, and really examine them and work with them and be kind and tender with them and do things to heal the wounds.
And a couple of things I was thinking about as you're saying that. One is people, I've heard people say this about other types of things, not about narcissistic abusive relationships, but rebut, how could I possibly be addicted to something that I absolutely hate? And there's certain interesting things that happen. We become so familiar with our discomfort and so familiar with our pain that we don't know anything else, and we know how to operate within our pain, that it becomes like this safe zone. And strangely enough, even though it's painful, the idea of out there is so scary for people in terms of making a change, that we can end up staying in things we genuinely do not want because some part of our programming says that it's the better option. So as I'm listening to you talking, I'm seeing things coming together, and I imagine there'll be people that are in relationships that are really unhealthy and maybe are with narcissists who haven't realized, who are starting to put pieces of this puzzle together in the way that you're talking about, the way that you're sharing these little nuances, because I think actually quite a few of them are subtle nuances that you could miss, but it's when they all come together and they repeat like patterns is where I'm hearing the power comes from.
Yes, patterns never lie.
No, patterns never lie. And doing the inner work, by the way, what you're talking about, I just wanted to share one thing on that, is that I've heard people say, why do I have to, not in this context, but in other contexts, why do I have to do the work when they're the ones that did this to me? So why should I have to do all of this work when my parents are the one that caused this problem for me? Or why do I have to do the work when it's my bullying boss that is treating me this way, or whatever it is? And the thing is that it doesn't matter what we go through in life. The inner work is your sacred work. It's like the blossoming of you in your life. Whatever it is that we go through, the healing process is like this beautiful gift to yourself, right? And so rather than feeling like I have to fix the stuff that they did to me, it's about I get to find myself and blossom myself in a not I'm trying to fix something, but I am stepping into my brightest possibility or life. I don't know. Does that resonate with you? Tell me.
It absolutely does. And okay, let's say it's not fair that happens to us when someone, even our parents, our parents were just doing the best with us from where they came from. If someone's saying, well, my parents did this to me, why should I do the work? Well, it's not only abuse that gives us, traumatic wounding. It can be anything. It could be being bullied on the playground. It can be your pet dying when you're in the first grade. It can be any number of things that create these wounds of abandonment, rejection. It is our responsibility, regardless of how the wounds got there, to try to heal them, because if we don't, we're going to keep repeating the patterns. We'll get out of one toxic relationship and go diving back into another one, doing a swan dive into the next toxic relationship. So that's the reason we need to. I mean, as a recovering codependent, I still have urges, but I don't act on them. I might have urges, that are what we call codependent, of people pleasing and that sort of thing, but I don't act on them. If I had not done the work, I would never have, gotten into the space where I am today, which is healed. I'm healed, happier than ever, going to be 50 in December. I mean, it's never too late to be happy. Never
Looking
too late to heal
amazing.
yourself.
Looking amazing. Feeling good.
Thank you.
I just love how you just said that. I feel the urges and I don't act on them. You're just like, right. It's not that you don't, like when I say with mind mastery and all sorts of things that I teach, it's not like you all of a sudden become superhuman and you don't have human tendencies. You don't have an ego. You don't have an ego. You don't have negative thoughts. Get real. Like, being human is messy, but you notice it, you don't act upon it, you interrupt it, you redirect yourself, you remind yourself of what's true, and that's the difference. You're not owned by your patterns or your past anymore.
Right.
So good. So there were a couple more of these indicators that I think are important that we want to share.
Right. So number 8 is you keep your relationship secret from other people. And this might be, let's say, for example, you've been in this, relationship and you've been mistreated for a long time, and your friends are getting tired of hearing about it. Your mom is tired of hearing about it. Even you're getting tired of hearing yourself talk about it. And so you stay in the relationship, but you start to lie about it, or you keep it a secret. I mean, I can't tell you the number of women I've worked with who have told me point blank, I've got to leave this relationship because if I don't, my adult children are going to just cut me out of their lives. And so they'll keep the relationship secret. They don't know I'm still seeing this person. And that's because other people are seeing very clearly that you're in this toxic, abusive environment, in this relationship. They don't understand why you can't leave. And it is very difficult. I would say it's the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my entire life, and other people would say the same thing. But if you have other people people who love you, and you're keeping the relationship secret, or they're telling you, I'm sorry, Mom, but if you don't leave this man, I just can't be around this anymore. I don't want to hear about it anymore. I don't want to see how he's mistreating you. Or it could be, you know, a man who's being mistreated. Mm-hmm. And your adult children, for example, are telling you, or people that you love are saying, can't be around this anymore. That's another really huge sign that you're in an abusive relationship.
Can I just say that I think when hearing you talk about this, I've really, as somebody who's new to this topic, hearing that it's not just as simple as, oh, this person's terrible. Obviously, they're treating me terribly. Obviously, I'm worth more and I just leave. There's so much going on. There's so many layers of conditioning and breaking down and trauma bonding and addiction, all sorts of things that are going on. So people really need to reach out for help, right, to make this move.
Yeah, it's something that's really hard to try to do on your own.
Yeah.
You need some kind of support, you know, your rock of Gibraltar, so to speak. It's like having a sponsor if you're trying to get over drugs or alcohol, because you know, it's really difficult to do on your own. I mean, I did it on my own. I mean, I did try going to therapists back then. No one had a clue how to help me. They didn't even know what was going on. Back then, we didn't know about narcissistic abuse, but it took me a lot longer than it needed to. So now that we have the resources we have today, it doesn't mean it's going to make it easier to do it, but you're going to have more support, more guidelines, you know, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. Powerful. Okay. And one other point that you raised, which I think we missed, was about parenting, having to parent your partner.
Oh, yes. I must have skipped that one. Yeah, if you feel like you are reparenting an adult, they're doing things that you feel like, I should not even have to explain human decency to this grown person. I shouldn't have to sit here and tell them why what they're doing is wrong.
Got it.
So you feel like you're reparenting or being a parent to that person. You're cleaning up their messes. You know, they're always going out and, you know, doing things that you feel like you have to go behind them and clean up their messes, or, you know, clean off the stage for them, that sort of thing. Absolutely. We're not here, like I said a little while ago, to rehabilitate adults unless they have a true condition. Mm-hmm. They've been in a car accident, or, you know, they had a bad reaction to medication. But we're talking about grown people who choose to abuse, who are acting in hurtful ways towards other people. That's not our job to fix.
Got it. Very clear message. Very clear message. Okay. Can you mention that you might share a little bit about red flag warning words or signs?
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Early red flag words, or things that someone may say that give you some red flags that they are manipulative and are going to be abusive if they're not already. And they might say things like, I tried calling you and you didn't answer, and you look at your phone and they've called like 30 times in 1 hour. That's a little bit extra.
It's extra. So, that's a little OTT.
Yes. Or no one will ever love you or understand you like I do. I mean, why would you have to say that? You shouldn't have to say something like that. You should show it if you really love someone. They'll be able to tell by your actions, not words. There are words that they might use to degrade you. Oh, you're a bad mom. You're a horrible parent. You're no fun. So things to degrade you and make you feel embarrassed and ashamed about yourself. Words to shame you. Like we said, you need to go on a diet, or this is why no one likes you. I had, in my own experience, my ex-husband would say things like that. Well, they told me not to trust you and I didn't want to believe them. I mean, if you're a person who you consider yourself kind and compassionate, and you try to go out in the world in a loving way, and someone's telling you, your friends told me not to trust you, that's a red flag. Your friends aren't going to be talking to you about you like that at all. So this is something they're making up to make you feel bad about yourself and to feel ashamed. They'll say things like, well, if you leave me, no one else is going to want you. You're too old now. You've lost your looks and that kind of thing. Or words to control you. And these are tricky because they might come across as seeming like the person is concerned for you and they care about you. They might say things like, well, you can go, but I don't really want you to. Like to a friend's house or to an office party. Well, you can go, but I don't want you to. You don't need to work. Stay home and take care of the kids. Oh my gosh, that's huge. And I've seen this. You know, people who are highly intelligent, they've got their college degrees, and they're, you know, talking to me, well, I haven't worked in 15 years because I quit so I could take care of the kids. Mm-hmm. That is really, I would never recommend that someone puts themselves in a situation where they're financially dependent on another person, unless it's something like they can't help, like maybe a physical disability or something. And even then, you might want to explore ways that you can take care of yourself. So those are things.
And that choice to stay home and look after the kids in the context of a pattern type of situation with narcissism is the red flag, right? Because a lot of women will make that choice, but it's in a healthy relationship. And
I'm glad you said that because I'm kind of, got
very in the narcissistic abuse context. I just want to make sure people understand in the context of these types of patterns, that becomes a way where you can end up being disempowered without realizing. It's a very good thing to do, being at home looking after the kids, but in the context of power over, control over, dominance, and abuse, it becomes another factor.
Right. And they're saying things like, if you're in a healthy relationship, and whether it's the man or the woman who stays working and the other stays home, it could be men, there's still going to be a synergistic pattern and a dynamic there. It's something the two of you agreed on because you both feel like it's the best thing to do, and you're a team. Whereas with a narcissist, they're going to say things eventually, oh, I'll take care of you. You don't have to worry about money. Stay home, take care of the kids. Then you do that. And then all of a sudden, you're a moron. You're not intelligent anymore. Well, I pay for everything, so I'm the one that gets to decide how we spend the money. Or they will take
that. Right. That's a flag in any situation, irrespective of, right? Is where
absolutely
balanced. And you use a beautiful word, and it is team. So when we're in relationship and it's healthy, we're a partnership, we're a team. Sometimes we're supporting the other, and then it flips around and the other supports us, and it's a partnership. We make choices together to walk the life journey together. Healthy individuals coming together for companionship, not one person dictating life.
Yeah, you should not be terrified to spend $10 on something.
Okay, that's not a sign. So this sounds like another sign. You're in a situation where there's power over being utilized in this way in the context of finances and independence, or lack of independence, as the case may be. And it is a full-time job to be at home looking after children.
It's hard. I have done it, by the way.
And it paid for that job.
It's very rewarding, but it's a lot more physically tiring than people realize. It is, in my opinion, harder than going into an office and working.
Yes,
absolutely.
Yes, I hear you. So this has been super fascinating and really helpful. Thank you for informing me, because I do a lot of work with people and I need to be able to know when I'm seeing what you're sharing and be able to refer people toward you to get the resources they need that are really in that niche. And for people that are listening that maybe are in that situation, they've known they needed that information to remind them, or people that have never realized before. So I do want to share really importantly that neither Kim or I are interested in spiritual and personal growth entertainment. We are about real change, and as Kim said, it's you watch videos, you read books, and then you take action, because that's where we actually get change happen. So Kim has got a wonderful resource. Can you tell us a little bit about this healing resource kit that you've got for people, Kim? And there's going to be a link with this video wherever you're watching it, that will go direct to Kim's website where you can get this free resource. And I highly recommend, if you're in any type of relationship that looks like this, smells like this, sounds like this, that you go and check it out, whether it's intimate or it's a family dynamic or it's a friendship or workplace dynamic.
Absolutely. Well, it's called the Beginner's Freedom Roadmap, and it's really a collection of different things. It has a 30-day no contact calendar with little suggestions about things you can do during that first month. It has a visualization exercise where you imagine what your life would be like if you weren't in an abusive relationship. It has a link to my free webinar where people can learn more about my own history with narcissistic abuse and what I did to overcome it, and just several other things like that they can use to try to get out on their own and start healing.
The masterclass sounds interesting because that's you demonstrating how you got from there to where you are now, which is glowing, happy, you know, like a whole beautiful phase of your life from where you were. So obviously you know what you're talking about, and to actually see that as a, I believe when we can look at other people's journeys, we're not doing it to mimic, we're doing it for the inspiration of what's possible, and then taking it and reflecting those learnings, which you'll share with people in the class, back to their own situation and how they could do the same.
Right. You know, and I really want people to understand that I know what this is like and how you might behave and act in ways that you never normally would, because people, if they choose to watch my webinar, my masterclass, they'll learn that I was once so sick with what we call narcissistic abuse syndrome and codependency and just the brainwashing. I actually agreed to be my husband's second wife, and I went to his country to fulfill that role. So that's how psychologically damaged I was at that time. So people can learn more about that in the master class.
Thank you so much for you.
No, thank you.
Really inspiring, and it's a really beautiful demonstration of how you can go from A to Z, if you like. And you know, like I can just see you're so happy. And you're so glowing, and it's
thank you.
It's really inspiring. It's really inspiring, and this has been super helpful. I'm grateful for your time, because I know, you know, a lot of people would love to have this time with you. I'm grateful to spend the time.
Well, it was good for me too, because any time I spend with you chatting and talking is good for me. You just lift up my vibrations. So
mutual fan club. So it's educational for me, and to everyone listening, please go check out Kim's resources. You're going to find the link to the free resource. I'll put links to all Kim's social media and website, and find out about her courses and books and all the other things that she has going on. So thank you so much for being with us, Kim. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. Goodbye, everyone.